too of kind of what's happened here at Fat Mac with the car. And
Yeah, I've been dealing with you for a year too. Okay, anyway.
So today's about the rear end fab work, and as you come around the back here, you can see that the fuel cell, which initially was supposed to be in the back seat here, has now been moved to the back rear crash structure. And hopefully this is like actually educational for some maybe other E46 guys out there, and maybe other chassis as well. Little background, I wanted it to be here. Weight-wise, I wanted it in front of the rear subframe to help with transition speed and having the weight in front of the axle. If we wanted to do that, there's two ways to do it. We could have had a full firewall, which I didn't want as a driver. That made me kind of feel claustrophobic. So I just wasn't happy with that solution. So the second solution that we were trying to do is I actually hit up Kevin Wells at Formula Drift, and I said, okay, if we want to not run a full firewall, how can we go about doing this in such a way that would be legal? And he said we have to enclose the whole fuel cell with a metal box on top, and as well as the filler neck, which would have gone to this window here, would also have to be encased in a metal tube.
It would be a dual layer.
Exactly. So that's a lot of stuff covering this fuel cell. And then Josh kind of hit me up because him and his team were having a bit of a brainstorming session, and that's when we decided to put it back here.
No, we were deciding that I was right and you were wrong.
Yeah, so it's really important that Josh understands that he was right.
I got one win. It never happens. I got one win when it comes to a car. No, you know what? When you get into, as soon as you said you didn't want a firewall, the options on this build did start getting limited.
Yeah.
But also from experience working at the track, being a crew chief, running and making sure a car works well, you start thinking about maintenance and service.
Yeah.
So I get why FD or Pro-Am want your fuel cell fully enclosed from the driver. I get the dual layer, I get the fireproofing, but that adds a whole nother problem. So you get into a point where you can't service the fuel pump.
Yeah.
And we did a mock up, we made the lid, we had everything in place, and then it was like, we're gonna be half an hour just to try and get to the fuel pumps.
Yeah.
Where in a timeout, if you do it properly, you could change a fuel pump or a filter and you're okay.
Yeah.
So there's also other things that come into play is we're putting a big heavy V8 in the front of the car. So shifting a little bit more weight to the back is not the worst thing ever, right? Now also we've done comparison running them all. I told you you're running a cool suit now.
Yeah.
So that was a good use of that space, so our labor didn't go completely to waste. A cool suit and the fuel cell are roughly the same size and we'll share some of the weight.
Yeah.
We'll also move around the battery and the fire extinguisher to help offset that as well. A lot of this came down to serviceability and manufacturing.
If you're an E46 guy, you know already there's a lot of guys that are running this setup.
Yeah.
And there's a few reasons why they make it work, but for our specific circumstance, the reason why serviceability would have been an issue if this was fully enclosed is that some guys run an external pump filter setup underneath the car. If that was the case, although we still kind of agreed that that wasn't the best option, then we would have been able to put this here and not worry about serviceability from the top because it would have all been underneath the car. In our case, this style of fuel cell is all going to be right here. So in order to get at that in a 5-minute change, it was just, we were going to make it unnecessarily challenging for ourselves. So Josh's idea with the cool suit, that's what this is, by the way, guys. This is like a cooler that's going to have literally just the water and the ice that's going to be circulating through my cool suit. For weight distribution, it's probably going to end up being roughly the same. Like Josh said, extinguisher, battery, etc. Once I mount it in the car, we scale it. We're going to just put the weight where we need it.
And like I said, having a cast iron V8 in the front with potentially a supercharger down the road, this is our conversations we've always had with this car is future-proofing, right? We talk about, okay, it's going NA now, but it's going to get a supercharger eventually. Well, that supercharger and the lines and another heat exchanger is more weight. So offsetting that, moving a fuel cell a little bit further back, it might affect your transitions now, but once you start putting that weight back up in the front, in the long term, it will actually make sense. I think there is an argument here to be made about sacrificing a little bit of the transition weight offset, we'll call it, compared to how it'll all work in serviceability, manufacturing, and working on it just in general, right?
And that's really what it always is. I feel like at this level, and we're trying to build a car like this, is like it's always, there's never a scenario, and if there is, you're very lucky, where you're doing something without a trade-off somewhere else, right? And especially when we're talking about weight distribution and serviceability, those are key things. It would suck to be in a position where we have, like you said, a clogged fuel filter, something that should be easily replaceable in a 5-minute, and then
you get knocked out because of
something stupid like
or like as simple as like we've seen other competitors, we've helped other competitors, is like a connection comes off the fuel pump.
Yeah,
it's just something simple like that. or you get a short or something happens where it's like, you know where everything is, but if it's buried underneath the car.
Yeah.
And then there's also stuff like, there's guys that make this work. I completely understand that. But those guys have a firewall or they have a different system. But like you said, in this scenario, this works well.
And that's the thing, yeah, exactly. Reiterating Josh, this is a proven place to put it, and there's lots of guys who make it work, but a lot of them are running a full firewall, and I'm just not down to do that as a driver. That just kind of isn't what I want. So this is our solution. The other thing too is this is not a massive fuel cell. This is like a 10-gallon. So
it's tiny.
It's a tiny fuel cell. So it's not a ton of weight back here. I've seen other guys, like I know the old HTK E46, they ran it back here. So I'm not really too stressed about it, but hoping to give you guys some insight, especially if you have an E46, but like I said, other chassis too might apply. These are the kind of the things you gotta consider when you're building a car like this. And hopefully you guys can at least take a little bit of that thought process away from this video and understand why we're making these decisions. So.
And then talk about future proofing again. This will be the end goal as a pro spec car.
Yep.
This is going to be an FD car. So we get into these conversations about where this fuel cell is now. Yeah, we moved it back a little bit. You guys can see the gap. That's for when this car gets a quick change next season or so. That way we don't have to come back in, cut everything back out that worked, and then redo it all over again.
So we've already, with the Bulldog change in the box right there, we've already taken measurements off of that, and we know where that's going to sit roughly in this car, and we've now accommodated the mounting position for the fuel cell so that we can still get off that back cover to change the gear ratio without having to, once again, do more fab work back here and cut stuff out. So.
And then other stuff that's been discussed and planned, the rear firewall now is going to be this height compared to your whole cage.
Yeah.
So it won't be in your line of sight.
Yeah.
And then this firewall that will be made down the road, if need be, can now be your new rad mount.
Yeah.
So at that point, we'll just cut a hole, mount the rad, we're done.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
We're not restructuring the whole back of the car again.
Yeah. And so Josh has this, and his team got this ready. This is obviously going to be the firewall. It'll be bead rolled and trimmed in its final form. It's going to get placed here. So the next video you guys will see will be the rear end completed with the bash bars and the firewall installed. And then after that, we can start moving on to drivetrain test fitting and whatnot. So
to add to that, the firewall will be the last thing to install, because as soon as you put the firewall in, everything's a pain in the ass.
For sure. Yeah.
So it'll be mocked up, it'll be sitting here ready to go in.
Good.
But there's a few things that you leave like right to the end because you don't want me tripping over everything. We've already smashed our shins in this a few times.
Yep. I don't doubt it.
Yeah, it is. But and then you guys can see, anyone that understands drift cars, you understand the back of the car is a crumble zone. So we rebuild, over engineer. This is like structural tubing. We're hoping this will never crush. All the bars that are going to get mounted to it will crush around it. You take them off, pull the bolt, replace the bar, put a new one in, and good to go.
Yep. So yeah, that's video 2, episode 2, rear end stuff.
Feels like episode 4.
Feels like episode 4. Stuff is actually moving and shaking on this car now, so that's exciting. And I think once we kind of get to the drivetrain stuff, it'll also feel like it's going a lot faster at that point too. All right, cool. Thanks guys, and tune in the next episode.